Good.
Numbers 13.
Okay, remember, 10 were bad, 2 were good. Those are numbers. So correct, Sue. Numbers 13 and 14. So whether you add 2, whatever you want to do to try to remember that, but the spies in Canaan land. Now, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. Obviously, Joshua chapter 6. Very good. All right, David fought Goliath. First Samuel. When it talks about David, but he's not king, that's First Samuel. If it's a king, David, then it's Second Samuel. So First Samuel, think of a teenager.
14? No, 17.
17. All right, Solomon prays and asks for wisdom. Now that would be Second Kings, chapter 3. All right. Good job. Don't feel bad if you missed 1 or 2. But we're still learning more than we knew on week 1, so that's good.
It's First Kings.
Yeah, I thought of that. Thank you. You got to stop because there's times I'm like, do I want to go back and look at that? All right. First Kings. Second Kings would be divided kingdom. So, all right. Tonight we're going to open our Bibles. We're actually going to use them while we're doing the top 10 chapters, and because there's some stories I want to get to right away, and maybe you've heard of them and maybe you haven't, but turn in your Bibles to the book of Job. We're looking at the 5 books of poetry. It's not necessarily storyline, but there's still a lot to learn, and so we want to look there at the first 2 chapters of Job. And what I want us to see, we're going to look at Job, and then we're going to look at Psalm 22 a little bit later, just so you know where we're going to turn in the Bible. But one of the things that people may not always realize is that though Satan was kicked out of heaven and cast to earth, he still answers to God. And part of the greatness of the story of the book of Job is it shows us the relationship between God and his fallen angel Lucifer or Satan, and then God and his relationship with those who follow him, and in spite of Satan. And so I want us to look at chapter 1, and you might notice on your outline it says Job's hedge of protection. God was protecting Job. And so I want us to first look at verse 6. Job chapter 1, verse 6. One day, are we almost there or close to there? One day the angels, notice that, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." Now, let's stop there a second and just remember that this was written at least by the time of Moses. That Job was not a Jew, but God had a relationship with him, and he was from somewhere in the east. And so I just think it's fascinating. And he said, "I have no one like him." Now, was Abraham alive? Was Isaac alive? But over in the east, I had no one like him, God says. And so I want you to see that. And he brings him to mind to Satan. In verse 9, "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has?" Notice how big the hedge is. His children, his property, his everything. "You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and his herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." Now, Satan is asking to do it, but he's blaming it on God. If you, and it's one of those, when you call a lady, "Hey guys," when you, it's like he's pointing forward, but he's really saying, he would do it. When someone will strike him, he will curse you to your face. Then the Lord said to Satan, very well, everything he has is in your power, not God's power at this point. He's going to remove that part of the hedge. Is in your power, but on the man himself, do not lay a finger. Do you see the love? All right. Then Satan went out from his presence on that day. And so all of a sudden his children are gone, his wealth is gone, and it's a scary part of the story. Are you okay so far? Let's go down to chapter 2. On another day, the angels came and presented themselves before the Lord. And Satan also came with them to present himself before him. Notice he's still answering to God. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. Can I stop and tell you one more interesting thing? It's not very specific. It's kind of like a child when you say, what are you doing? Nothing. God already knew, but he still asked, where you been? Verse 3. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity throughout, though you incited me against him to ruin him without reason. Skin for skin, Satan replied. A man will give all that he has for his own life, but now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, very well. He is in your hands, but you must spare his life. There's still a hedge. There's still a level you can't touch. Notice Satan can't touch him until God allows it. It's not that God does it, but God allows it. Any thoughts, any questions?
I find it interesting. I don't know how other to phrase it than to say that it tells us what a worthy adversary Satan is. You would have thought God would have said, I ain't giving you the time of day, buddy. You know what I'm saying? And instead, he wanted to prove to Satan, or he wanted to show Satan, I've got a worthy servant here, and you can do what you want, and nothing's going to happen to you. It just tells me what caliber of character Satan is, even in the eyes of God.
He wants to prove God wrong, but he doesn't. And God brought up Job because he knew, with foreknowledge, Job's not going to bend. And I want us to understand that when there is difficulty in our lives, tragedy in our lives, it's an opportunity to prove Satan wrong. Because he wants to discourage us. He wants to deceive us. And it gives us that opportunity. All right, now I'd really love for you to read at least those 2 chapters all the way to the end, but you must spare his life. The other thing, before we go too far, let's go back to the end of chapter 1. And when his children and his wealth was gone, all in one day, in verse 20, Job got up, tore his robe, shaved his head, and then he fell to the ground in worship. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. And in all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. I think that line is very important. When he says God took it away, God allowed for it to be taken away, but there are times in our earthliness it looks like God did it. All the hurricanes of recent days. Did God send them? Did God allow it? Isn't it interesting to have to kind of wrestle with that? And so I just want to share with you those 2 chapters. It's the first book of poetry. It's powerful. But I want you to see that Satan does not have power over God, and he still, to this day, still answers to God and will in the last days when he's thrown into the pit and it's sealed God is still in control. All right. Are we okay with those two chapters? I just wanted to spend a little time in case there's some here tonight that did not know that story other than Job suffered a bunch. All right. Let's go to the next one in Psalm 22, the prophecies of the crucifixion. And while you're turning, I'll just share with you with 150 chapters and so many wonderful psalms, it drives me crazy to sometimes pick. So a little bit later, I might ask you, what's your favorite psalm or one or two favorite psalms? And if anybody wants to, they can write some of them down in the margins. But I picked a few just because either maybe you've missed some of the significance of a chapter, but and Psalm 22 is one of those that I want to make sure we get to. Now remember, this is David, so it's hundreds of years before Jesus. But in the inspiration to write this song, it prepares us for Jesus and the crucifixion. Now, one more thing. I know we're in the Old Testament, but let me tell you one thing about the crucifixion. Maybe it'll start to almost prepare you for Easter. You ready? Have you ever heard of the pain word, description word, excruciating? To watch something was excruciating. That word comes from when, especially because the Romans did so many crucifixions, it came from the word of the pain it is to watch a crucifixion, not be on the cross. Just how painful it is to watch it was, do you hear the word crucifix in the middle? Excruciating. It was the pain of watching a crucifixion. I don't know if you ever knew that. And so that's quite phenomenal to me that that word comes from how painful it was not only to be on the cross, but to watch it. Now, I don't know if we want to read the whole chapter, but I do want to highlight a few, maybe 5 or 7 at least, of the little previews of Jesus on the cross. Obviously, verse 1. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. All right, do you see that? Elo, Elo, laham shabachani. That's what Jesus said on the cross. Quoting David, but also showing us that Jesus experienced what we experience. If we were just to read that and say, boy, David had a bad day and maybe we can relate. My God, why does it seem like you've forsaken me? Well, remember, Jesus doesn't ask anything of us that he didn't physically experience himself. And so I want you to see that one, and maybe for time's sake, we'll move on to verse 7. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusted the Lord. They said, let the Lord rescue him. Now that one's a little different. He healed other people, let him heal himself. But do you see how watching him naked on the cross, they hurled insults. They mocked him. Verse 14. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. Why would his bones, Jesus' bones, be out of joint? Dropping that cross in the hole, boom, and everything kind of shakes. All right. And then as we go down to verse 15, my mouth is dry up like potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. Was Jesus thirsty on the cross, remember? And somebody got hyssop and put a little vinegar on a sponge. All right, verse 16. Dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircle me. They pierce my hands and my feet. Now, David probably felt stuck, and in a poetic form, inspired by the Holy Spirit, said it's like my hands and feet are nailed down. Sometimes we're stuck. I go this way, I'm wrong. I go this way, I'm wrong. But for Jesus, he really did have his nails pierced. All right, any thoughts, any questions?
Pastor, I read that the crucifixion, which this is talking about, it wasn't even invented. They didn't use crucifixion.
I wanted to say that, but I hadn't said that yet. So notice, that's why David, he's just describing something poetically. He doesn't know he's really prophesying because it hadn't been invented yet. Correct. Very, very good.
I have one other thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
The very first verse, the Pharisees were so versed in the Bible
Yeah.
that all you had to do is read the first verse of that psalm, and they would know
Right.
the rest of the psalm and know
Yes.
he was speaking about
Yes.
what was happening
This is
without
David's
even
psalm.
saying it.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, because see, they didn't have chapters, but you would say the first, it's kind of like with certain songs, you say the first line of the song, and then you recognize it. All right, very good. Verse 18. Is that what we want? They divided my clothes among them, and they cast lots for my garments. And that took place for Jesus. You can go today to Israel and see places where they draw a circle and kind of like pie shapes in the circle, and as they roll stones or dice kind of things, then it would decide who gets the garment of Jesus, and or whoever else is on the cross. There's more, but I'll just highlight maybe one or two more. Verse 24. For he was not despised or scorned, the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. God was still there, but it sure appeared as God kind of had to separate himself. As all the sins were put on Jesus, sin separates us from God, and that's why there's this separation. All right. There's some more if we want to get into more of the kind of the smaller details. But have you seen that before? Did you know Psalm 22 was about the crucifixion? Maybe so, maybe not, but it's fascinating. All right. So the first one I want us to understand tonight is Job 1 and 2. If you want to understand about the hedge of protection, that's Job 1 and 2. The crucifixion is Psalm 22. Another one I like, and I just want to encourage you in case you're brand new to the Bible, but you kind of feel like, is God really there for me? Psalm 46, he is always there as our present help. He's not a help in 3 hours. He's not a help in 3 days. He is our present help. That's Psalm 46. Beautiful chapter. Then, when David, and in his sin, needed forgiveness, Psalm 51, cleanse me and I shall be clean. Created me a new heart, of God, Psalm 51. So that might be, for me, one of the top 5, if you want to take that home and go, where's the psalm when David and Bathsheba and that whole story? I'm 99% sure, isn't it? Bathsheba, that Psalm 51, okay. Another one that's rather famous, but I still put it in, Psalm 91, he is our shelter, our shade. We can rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I've just given you some Psalms of comfort there, so Psalm 91. Let me do 2 more. You know, a few weeks ago I preached on Psalm 119, and we'll explain it again on the backside. But it's a huge chapter, largest chapter in the Bible, but it's all about the Word of God, and it's fascinating when you really get into it, but it is big, so if you sit down to read it, sit in a comfortable chair. And then Psalm 139, he made me and he is with me. Again, I picked some Psalms of comfort, but I just think that's a great one. You knit me together in my mother's womb. So that's Psalm 139. Now, just for fun, let me get my pen because I want to participate too. What other chapter of the book of Psalms do you have a favorite other than those I listed? And it's okay to do that because I have others I wanted to list and I haven't had time. No room. Yes, Sister Carol? 37. That's a fantastic one. Let me just tell you what it's about real fast. Psalm 37 is when you're innocent but you're accused of being at fault. And people think you're wrong, and you know you're not wrong, but if you will just not fret about it, God will protect you. And I think it's about 7 times in there, it says, and you will inherit the land. Which means in time, people will realize you're not the one at fault. But you'll be accused, you'll be blamed. Psalm 37 is a great one. Thanks, Carol. See, you guys get to answer all of my other ones, and then I get to agree. Somebody else? Yes. Psalm 19, very good. He speaks through the stars and through the way the skies are. The sun moves up and comes back down. All right, Psalm 19. What else you got?
Number 1 and 150.
A little louder.
Number 1 and
Yep.
150 also.
Oh, yeah. The first and the last, that's pretty good. Alpha and Omega, right? Okay. Yeah, the first chapter about don't walk with scoffers and sit in the seat of mockers and all of that. And then 150, the worship song. All right. What else you got?
100.
100, yeah. Real sweet, short little psalm, but really powerful. All right. 62. I know that one, but remind me, but that's a good one. Yeah.
The 23rd, it was the first, really, I think, verses I ever memorized in the Bible as a kid in
Yeah.
Little Falls Church,
Oh,
in
yeah.
Sunday school. And it wasn't until, as I was as an adult, I really understood what it meant.
Yeah.
I knew it, I
Yeah.
memorized it, got a little star. I
Yeah.
could memorize it back there.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. I left that one out all because it's so well known, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's powerful still.
When Tom said, reading the Psalms, I read the Psalms that we studied that in Bible school.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it, yeah. Anybody else? Can I give you 3 more if you just want to write them in? Because again, I want to create an appetite for you. Psalm 145 is who God is. All right? He is this, he is that, he is this. So Psalm 145 is who God is. And Psalm 146 and 147 right after that is what God does. God does this, and God does that, and God does this. And so, should you be looking for something to read in the Psalms, and you want to read those 3, be sure to read what other people have suggested too. But I just like that one chapter is all, this is who God is. And then the next 2 chapters, this is what he does. One more good one. See, I can't stop talking, but there's 150 of them. Psalm 103, do not forget all of the benefits of God. And then it lists them, and so that's a powerful one. All right, I'll be quiet on that, and we'll move on. Proverbs 4, if I had to pick only 2 chapters of all the good Proverbs, Proverbs 4 says, protect your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. It's near the end of the chapter, but it's powerful. And then, obviously, a woman of honor, Proverbs 31, and it's just, it's a very complex chapter. It says so much. Many women read it and feel a little overwhelmed, but even if one portion of it reminds you maybe of mom or grandma or of yourself, that it's quite fascinating. And so Proverbs 31, you want to be sure to know that one. And then lastly, out of the book of Ecclesiastes, there's a time for everything and everything under heaven. And so Ecclesiastes chapter 3. All right, any questions on those 10? We've kind of gone through them fast.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
Our ladies' Bible study learned that Psalms 22 is the crucifixion, 23 is past,
Yeah.
23 is present, and 24 is future.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. 22 is what he did. 23 is who he is today for us, and 24 is still future. Okay. Good. Good stuff to share. We can all learn from each other. All right, now let me just give you a synopsis, or at least some other interesting facts of each of the 5 books tonight. Job's family and fortune at the beginning of the book. He has 1 wife, 7 sons, and 3 daughters. All right, he has 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys. He had quite a spread, didn't he? That's quite an amount of wealth. And so I want us to see that. And in one day, now he got to keep his wife and his health for a while, but he lost everything else in one day. So now you read that again. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, 7 sons, 3 daughters, all gone in the same day. And he knelt down and worshiped God. Said the Lord gave and the Lord took away. Then come 3 friends. And the first three, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, they come, and the best thing they did was sit with him for 7 days and not say anything. And then they opened their mouth, and then things got a little tough. Because they were just sure, Job, what did you do wrong? God only does this when you do something wrong. So another real strength in the book is when we go through tragedy, we don't have to say, now what did I do? Because Job's book is to remind us, it may not, if God wants to specifically convict you of something, then that's fine. But otherwise, it may just be that he's putting you through a trial and you get to prove Satan wrong. Well, after that, a younger man comes, Elihu, and he talks, and it's quite an interesting speech that Elihu gives, because he's trying to be respectful of the other three men. He's trying to be respectful of Job because they're all his elders. It's kind of nice in a day like today to read something where they actually respected their elders. And that's kind of interesting. But Job's real foe was Satan. Keep that in mind. Once in a while, we think it's our friends who disagree with us are our foes. But we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and powers, the demonic realm. And so Satan is really the enemy. All right? Makes sense? Now, God replenishes Job. So he has the same wife, but he has 7 more sons and 3 more daughters. But his wealth of livestock doubles. Notice the numbers above it, but 14,000 sheep, now 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 donkeys. That is a lot of hay. Can I just tell you, I got to stop there and say that's a lot of hay. But he gets it done. Here's the miracle, and many of you will already know this. But why, at the end, where the livestock doubled, and he only had the same number of children the second time? Because the others are in heaven. The number of children did double. Because now there are 14 sons and 6 daughters. And so that's just can I say this? Listen to me closely. It's another part of the poetry, the beauty, the artisticness of God in this story, showing us that the number of children here and the number of children here didn't double, but everything else did, because he's highlighting these are still there. They're still in heaven. They're eternal beings. And that was double too. So I just think it's a beautiful book. It's a little long. You got to get through it. Yeah, brother.
I was going to say, chapter 19 has one of the greatest verses in the Old Testament, where Job says, "I know that my Redeemer lives."
Right.
So one day, I can't.
Yeah. I know my Redeemer liveth. Yeah. And then, is it about chapter 22, 23? He says, "I'm sure I have a friend who is my intercessor." And it's somewhat a prophecy of Jesus who intercedes for us. I know I have a friend who is an intercessor. But yeah, I know my Redeemer liveth. And so that's powerful. Chapter 19. All right. Good discussion tonight. Let's flip over to Psalms. I've given you a list of all the authors. Once in a while, some people think David wrote all 150. Well, no, but he wrote a lot of them. And I didn't take time to count all of the ones he wrote. But I wrote also the other names here. The asterisks are people from the tribe of Levi, and they were the worship, the priests, and then also sons of Korah, which are also there, and the Ezraites, which is a section within the Leviticus tribe. Probably the other name you want to see is Moses, and that's chapter 90. His psalm is chapter 90, if you want to write that one down. But if you remember, Moses and Aaron are brothers. They too are from the tribe of Levi. And so, I'm not sure about Jephthah, but David is from the tribe of Judah. But the psalms that are written other than David are pretty much all from the Leviticus or the priestly tribe. And so that's quite interesting in their leading of the worship. All right, any questions? All right, once Psalms was 5 books, and I have those listed out for you. If you ever want to read a book of the Psalms, the first book, second book, third book, fourth, fifth, I have those broken down for you. And then just a reminder of Psalm 119, it's the Hebrew alphabet, 22 letters. And so there are 22 stanzas in the poetic rhythm. Now, one of the things you might say, you keep saying it's poetry, but it doesn't rhyme. Well, one, remember, we're in a different language. It's been translated. But the other thing is in Israeli poetry, it's more about rhythm than rhyming. Do you catch that? It's the rhythm more than the rhyming. And so I want us to see that. And so with 22 stanzas and 8 verses in each stanza, you can do the math, and that's why there's 176 verses. Again, another cutesy thing, but it's still kind of fun to know. The longest chapter in the Bible is 119. Shortest chapter in the Bible is 117. And the chapter stuck in the middle is, they tell me, the middle chapter of the Bible. If you start with Genesis 1 and Revelation 22 and you go boop, 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 the chapter you're stuck in the middle of the Bible is 118. So that's kind of interesting. 117, 18, and 19 all have their own significance. All right. Any questions about the book of Psalms? If you're speaking about a certain psalm, you drop the S off the end, like Psalm 23. But otherwise, the whole book is Psalms because it's plural. All right? Any thoughts or questions? Let's go on to Proverbs. I just kind of tried to show you 4 values theologically and application-wise for the book of Proverbs. Attention is given to the personal qualities needed, to be gracious and to be calm, not to have an extreme temper or things like that. So attention is given to the personal qualities needed, wisdom and understanding, and also the dangers to avoid. Secondly, applicable to all people of any period, of any culture. That's what's so fascinating about the book of Proverbs. You could take it to the bush of Africa. You could take it to the hills of China, translate it, and it would all make sense, because any culture, any time period in history, and it works. Does that just show you it's God's word? Any time period, any culture, and it works. The next one, authentic respect for others, especially those in authority. I think that's, again, a message that is needed in these days. But then lastly, the advice that is so practical and helpful for personal growth and maturity. Just a thought, this is always a little complicated, but I'm sure you guys are so smart, you'll be able to pick this up the first time I say it. You know there's 30 to 31 days in a month. Everybody okay with that? Picture a calendar. If you took 5 chapters of Psalms, you took 1 chapter of Proverbs, you could read both books in a month. Now, maybe you don't want to start that fast. Maybe you just want to start a little slower. Whatever the date is, like today's the 14th, you read Proverbs 14. But you could read the whole book of Proverbs in a month, depending on if it has 30 or 31 days. But that's one. The other way, with 150 chapters, you read 5 a day and keep track, or you look at the calendar and then you do a little math. You can figure out what 5 chapters to read that day. Does that make sense? I know it's a little mathematical, so that some of you, your brains just turned off. Wake back up. We'll stop talking about math, I promise. Okay. Let's go to Ecclesiastes. I want you to know that this book was written by Solomon with a frustrated humanistic perspective. There's some phrases in it that sound a little scary, but it's because he's frustrated. Maybe today's clinical word might even be depressed. It could be debated whether Solomon was frustrated with humanity or depressed, but he was definitely seeing things. But what's interesting is God is still in it. Some 40 times the word God is named, but 6 of those of which we're called to fear him and respect him, that we answer to him. So that's quite fascinating. But chasing after the wind is a repeated phrase, and that just means the rat race, that the world is, and then under the sun, this is a very temporal, this temporal life. And notice it's a contrast because heaven is perfect, but the frustration is we live on this side of the sun. Everything under the sun is frustrating. Everything, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. So, any questions? I'm going a little fast, but we're moving right along. You okay? Now, is it hot in here, or is it just me? Because now we got to talk about another book. The Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, and that last one is really the Hebrew title. In the King James, to clarify who wrote it, they called it the Song of Solomon. Nothing wrong with that, but it's just as other translations are written now since then, they've gone back to the Hebrew title of Song of Songs. So just so you know, they're not getting liberal, they're kind of really going back to the roots there. But this book is quite interesting because it's recognizing God's love in an allegory of newlyweds. Two giggly, bashful lovers. But again, newlyweds, it is under the canopy of Mary. So let me just share with you 4 or 5 things quickly. First of one is the groom is the beloved and the bride is my darling. And then there is a women's chorus. So depending on your Bible, whether it lists it, and the more contemporary your translation, it may even say him, her, him, her. But some will just, I'm just giving you a code word so you know, is a man talking or is a woman talking? The groom is the beloved and the bride is my darling. Okay, does that make sense? All right. And then it was said that in the years between the testaments, between the Old Testament and New Testament, rabbis refused to let people read it who were under 30. Does that tell you? At least back then it was very racy. And, getting warm in here. All right. Next one. The word picture and traditions will seem strange to you, but it's from another culture. For example, when talking about the bride, the groom, who is quite fascinated visually, one time he describes his bride from her hair on down, each facial feature, and he just keeps going down her body. That's chapter 4. Chapter 7, quite interesting, from a dance of back then when a woman would just move her foot and wiggle her ankle. And then as the man would watch her foot and her ankle, then he'd notice her legs and then go up. And so in one of the chapters, his eyes go down, and in one of his chapters, his eyes go up. Now, there is a phrase, her nose is like a strong tower. It shows character. But today we might go, are you kidding me? Or her teeth are sheep. Well, sheep were valuable. One of them that I really have appreciated once you go to Israel and you see it is her hair flows like the hills of Gilead. They're wavy and they go down beautifully and gracefully. And so again, the descriptions may seem very awkward to you. Another one that's very non-American is that as he is describing his bride, he notices she's a little pouchy and he likes the mound of wheat. I used to live with a Haitian, a guy who was the son of a witch doctor. He got radically saved and came to Fort Wayne and was studying to be a pastor. And the one thing he always used to tease me about, because we'd sit in our dorm room together, and he says, can I just tell you, Alan, American men are silly. They find the sickest looking woman and find her beautiful. He said, not us in Haiti. We want them big, strong, and comfortable. And so I just want you to see that there could be some cultural differences. One of the things that maybe isn't so cross-cultural, but the woman is looking for safety and security. She comments about how his arm, his strong arm, feels comfortable under her. And so she's looking for strength and security. He in this early relationship is looking for beauty, but loves her, and so it's just, it's an allegory. It takes a little stretching, but it's there. Perhaps one other thing I guess I'll share with you real quick, if you want to write this down. 3 times is an interesting quote throughout the book of only 8 chapters. And if you want to know how crazy I am, yes, one time I did an 8-week series on the Song of Solomon. Attendance was fantastic. All right. Here's the quote. Do not arouse passion or waken love until it's time. Think of that in intimacy. Think of that with young men and young women, that they should not arouse their passions so early. They need to mature a little first, and so that's why the rabbis didn't even let them read this till they were 30 years old. Those 3 quotes are, here's the chapter and verse. Chapter 2, verse 7, chapter 3, verse 5, and then chapter 8, verse 4. Do not arouse or awaken love or passion until it's time. And that's quite a teaching verse at that. And so there are your 5 books. And any questions you have, these are the 5 books of poetry. And if you have other questions that you want to even ask me privately, that's okay too. But we have lots to pray about, so are we good with the Bible questions? All right. And